What's going on, guys? Welcome back to the channel. I've recently been watching these weekend animated music videos, and I thought there's a lot of really cool stuff that we could pull from, make some tutorials on. So I'm gonna plan a 3-part mini series here. This is gonna be video number 1 of that. I'm gonna show you a lot of things that you can do in After Effects to create a music visualizer, a music video like this. And even if you aren't trying to completely recreate something like this, I think that this video in particular and a lot of the other videos I'm going to show you are going to give you a really strong tool set when it comes to being able to make your own music visualizers, being able to incorporate some of these things into your music videos, into whatever video you are trying to make. So we're going to hop into After Effects. I'm going to give you guys the basics on how to create something like this, where you have this car going down this light tunnel, and there's a lot of really interesting things happening here. Now in part 2, the next video that I want to make after this, I want to go into Cinema 4D and give you a 3D perspective on how to do this and show you how to fully construct something like this in 3D, because there's a lot of advantages of that. In this video, we are going to touch on some 3D, but we're not going to fully dive into it as much as part 2. And I mentioned this is a 3-part series, so this is going to be the After Effects. Part 2 is going to be all 3D. The third video that I want to make is actually on the blinding lights visualizer that they made. I want to show you guys how you could create something like this, where it's a full-on 3D performance, 3D experience. So I'm going to get a motion capture suit. I'm going to look into some cheap ways to get some motion capture things going. I'm going to try and recreate this as best as I can. So I hope you are excited. Leave a like if you do want to see those two, and let's go and hop right into Adobe After Effects. So we're going to start in Premiere, and I'm going to use a dynamic link, but of course you guys could always just start in After Effects. But anyways, to set up my dynamic link, I'm just going to create a transparent video layer here in Adobe Premiere like this. I'm going to right click on it, and I'm going to replace it with After Effects composition. Only reason I'm doing that is so later on I can just color grade using Premiere at the very end, just because that's my own preference. But either way, here we are in Adobe After Effects. I can just delete this transparent video, and this is pretty much just a placeholder with my little dynamic link that I have here. Let's start with the light tunnel. This is the main essence of our environment. So we're going to start off here by just right clicking and creating a solid. And let's just go ahead and make a black solid for now. Click OK. Let's right click down here and create another new solid, and this time we're going to make a white solid. If I go up to my effects and presets here, I can look up a little CC starburst effect, place that on my white solid, and now as you see, you kind of have this light, these particles coming towards you. Even though technically this layer in of itself is 2D, you have that 3D kind of going through space, having these lights coming towards you. Look. So you can do a lot with that. And of course, I'm going to try and show you this with as minimal plugins as possible. Obviously, once we get to the 3D, we're going to need to use some plugins, so we'll keep that for later. But in terms of designing the look here, you can replace something like this with something like the particular plugin from Red Giant. So there are a lot of alternatives, but I'll try and keep it as vanilla After Effects as possible. We're going to look up CC Light Burst. Place Light Burst onto your white solid here. And you're going to see that these little dots now kind of turn into streaks. Now you'll notice that these rays kind of look like they're pulling towards the camera instead of going forward. So let's just set the ray length here in our effect controls for light burst to negative. So let's try maybe -60. And now you'll see it looks like we're traveling forward. It looks like these light rays are coming towards us. Now up in our CC starburst here, let's actually kind of bump up our grid spacing so that this isn't such a tight cluster. So let's maybe put this up to something like 15, and you can also adjust the scatter here and the speed, so you have those available to you if you need them. Now we kind of have these looking a little bit more blocky than we want, so let's just grab the ray length here. It's at -60 right now. Let's just bump that up to -100. The last thing we're going to apply here is a matte choker effect, and you'll see everything goes away. You can grab this little choke value here. We're going to place this at -125. And then last but not least, this is a little bit too blocky. Let's take the size under CC starburst and just lower that down, so this kind of just looks like beams of light. And this is pretty accurate for what we're looking for. This is the main thing we're trying to recreate. Once it gets to around this part, you can make these streaks a little bit longer. You'll see there's sort of a lens effect here. So let's go ahead and apply that next. Maybe you want to keep dropping that ray length so it matches the video a bit more. And now let's add our lens. So we're going to look up CC lens and drop that onto our solid here. Now you can take the size and just kind of push that however you would like. All right, so now let's start tweaking the look and adding the color to this. We're going to right click down here, and we're going to create a new adjustment layer. We're going to apply a channel blur. So apply your channel blur here. And this is going to make it so it's only going to colorize the specific lines that we want without having to tweak anything. So if you just bump up your red blurriness, you'll see that you'll start getting blue with this red edge. Let's also check to repeat edge pixels here, and let's go ahead and apply a glow. So we'll use the base After Effects glow, and then you guys can use this little glow value to change the look how you want. Maybe you kind of want to just use it as highlights here. Let's go ahead and just put up the radius just to really see how that glow is reacting, make it look like some laser light beams. Now, when it comes to building the environment of your scene, placing in your car, placing in the tunnel, so right click, new solid, and a link to Element 3D will be down below if you need it. Let's name this one road. So drop the element plugin onto that solid here. Now let's go ahead and click scene setup. So this is as easy as just going to create and just making a plane here. And let's just grab the size and just make it a longer plane. I'm gonna go to Google Images and I'm just gonna look up road texture. Just right click on one you like, go ahead and just save the image. And then popping back into After Effects, if you open up this little plane model, this is the texture. If you select that, you're gonna see your textures menu here. So you have your diffuse, your glossy. You don't need to know a lot about this, just click on diffuse here and then click load texture, open up that little road image that we just saved. So as simple as that. So now we have the diffuse and you'll see that this is oriented the wrong way. So to fix that, we could just go into the UV transform, but to make it easier, let's just click on the plane. And instead of making this the long part of it, let's just make this a little bit longer. Bump up your size X and click OK. Let's go and right click and create a new camera. And if you just click C and you rotate a bit, there's your road. I'm going to open up my render settings option here. I'm going to go to physical environments and I'm just going to bump that down a tiny bit. And if we click back in scene setup, speaking of physical environments, you guys can load in any custom environment to be able to reflect here. So if you go on the internet and if you just search up like neon free HDRI, click here and you can save this for free. So once you've saved something like that, if you do want to mess around with your environment here, you just go and click to load it in and there you go. So now you can see how this is going to reflect with the road. So you'll see your UV offset here. As you see, if I move that, you're going to see the reflection really start to change. We can also click on here and if you'd like, you can even go and look up a little puddle texture just by searching puddle normal map on Google Images. I've already got this saved. So if you just look this up, puddle normal or roughness map, here's what it looks like. Just try and save something like that. Let's open this up in our glossiness and now you're going to see that projected onto our road. And you can kind of lower the value to get a mix of the reflectance. And now we just have a lot more realism in our road than we did before. All right, so I positioned my road. Now we need to make the camera animation. So go to your camera transform options at the beginning of your video. Just click and drag down to keyframe. Now you just drag for however long you want this animation to be. And I'm just going to click C on my keyboard to move forward here. I'm just going to click and drag forward. And let's drag these keyframes all the way in. Here's our timeline. As you can see, let's maybe make this like a 3-second animation. If you want, it's even easier. Just grab your position value here. I'm going to start here actually. So there you go. We have our road now. We're going pretty quick. We're traveling pretty fast through time and space. Now we're going to use Element 3D again, and we're going to create a little tunnel shape. Because if you look in the original example here, a lot of this is just this tunnel shape over top, and you can kind of see the bend. So let's see what we can do to create this tunnel. And this is going to come in handy later, because you can use these tunnel 3D tricks that I'm about to show you to make any of these crazy animations in the shape of the tunnel. So let's create the tunnel. So I'm going to grab my 3D road layer. I'm going to click Control D to duplicate it. So we're going to open up Element here. I'm going to click Scene Setup, and I'm going to delete both plane models off here. So we're going to start from scratch. Now what we're going to do now is we're going to go to create, and I'm going to create this little sphere. And if I select this tube here, I'm going to grab my orientation, and I want to position this so that I can fully see it. So let's put this at 90. This is going to determine how straight edge this is. So if we bump up the sides, you're going to see it's going to get more straight. If you lower the sides, you can even make it a triangle if you wanted to, or just kind of maybe like this hexagon shape. Now let's raise the height so that this is a longer tube, and I think that's a little overkill. And let's go ahead and just click OK on this for now. So there's our little 3D tube. Go to World Transform. We're going to grab our position that brings us closer to the camera. So it's our X, because we just rotated a little bit earlier. So now it just looks like we're in this gray space here. What I'm going to do is show you a little trick where we can have our light tunnel be the actual texture for this cylinder tunnel. So to do that, just select this. Let's actually rename this to 3D tunnel. Let's actually place this in a layer below the road so we can see the road in here while we're doing this. And there, now you see the little light at the end of the tunnel, so that's nice. Select 3D tunnel, and we're gonna go to where it says custom layers here. Open up custom texture maps. And now what we're gonna do is I'm gonna grab all these solids and adjustment layers, the little light wall that we made before. I'm gonna right click and I'm gonna pre-compose them together. I'll just name this light beam. So clicking on 3D tunnel again, we have our custom texture maps. Layer 1, we're gonna select light beams, source, effects, and mask. Now if we go back into scene setup, and this is a really awesome feature of Element 3D that I don't think a lot of people utilize. You can open up your model, click on the little texture here, and where it says diffuse, instead of loading in some sort of custom texture or some glossy texture, you can actually just click this drop down and use your custom layer. And this counts for animated textures as well. So once we click OK here, and OK up in the top right, and there you go. Now you can see our tunnels kind of rotating over the top. Looks pretty cool. So now we have our light tunnel going through, and if you want to even make this a little bit better, click T and lower the opacity on this even more so you can kind of have the shape of the tunnel, but ultimately you can still see those light beams on the outside going through. And you can see how things are really starting to shape up. So that's really some of our basics. I showed you how to do those custom layers here. What you could do is you could change the custom layers to change the different designs, or you could even Control D to duplicate the 3D tunnel. And I'll rename this to Design 2. Just try and find some little overlay. Just look up something like a glitch. Or maybe even like a shockwave. I think that'll be a little bit better. These are all just little overlays, elements. If you want to find some free ones, just look at my website. We have a lot of assets. Of course, you can just Google if you want some free shockwaves or anything. Just find some free assets out there that you'd like to use for your background, for your visualizer, whatever it is. Download them, drag them into your composition. So what I'm gonna do here is I'm gonna make this a custom layer as well. Back into design number 2. Let's go to our custom layers and let's change this to shockwave. Just make it source. So now as you see, if I press play, tunnel number 2 is gonna have my shockwave animation kind of stretched in this tunnel shape, which is really great. And another thing I should mention here, green, add, and there you go. It kind of adds into what you're able to do here. And if you want to change the way that this is being projected in this tunnel, you just go back to your scene setup once more, click on your diffuse, and you kind of just, and let's maybe add some repeat. Let's also add some offset. We're just gonna really see what happens here. And there you go. Now you have a completely different thing. So you can really do a lot of interesting stuff using those custom layers, applying them to different shapes. Maybe if you want, instead of changing around blindly the custom layer, you could go to World Transform and you could use your X rotation. So this is pretty cool. Let's maybe have it like this. Let's actually bring in another little overlay. This time, let's bring in a little glitch. Now we can just hide the layer because we don't need that. We just need it in the comp. We can select design 3. I'll just name this design glitches. And I'll go to my custom layers once more. And I'll change this to my glitches. Keep it on source again. And there you go. Now you've got your glitch going on in your tunnel. So just like that. And I think this really shows the power of doing it in After Effects. I do want to show how to do it in 3D, but you have a lot at your disposal in After Effects, especially if you pick up something like Element 3D. So you can go out of the tunnel, or we can create some little transitions. Okay guys, so to transition from our first After Effects environment to the next, this is a little bit complicated, I think, for a lot of people, especially because we're combining this effect here with this 3D tunnel. So I'm gonna go ahead and just give you the overall gist of it. I'm not gonna go too in detail because I think it would eat up a lot of time in this tutorial. Instead, what I'm gonna do is I'm gonna create a full separate step-by-step guide for this, and I'm gonna link it on the screen now. So I'm still gonna briefly show you how to do this and give you my explanation. I'm gonna go more in depth with this with its own tutorial. I'm also gonna even render out some little preset things you can do just to be able to just drag and drop this onto your footage. So that will be coming out in probably like a day or two. That'll be bonus on top of the other 2 videos I mentioned at the beginning. But anyways, if you want to create this sort of glowing kind of wipe away Luma matte transition, here's the basic gist of how to do it. So we're gonna go over to our project bin in the top left here. We're gonna go ahead and create a new composition here, Luma matte transition. Let's So click OK. And let's even create a new folder here just so we can keep everything organized because we're getting a little bit cluttered. So, all right. So within this folder, we have our Luma Matte Transition. Let's go ahead and start crafting this. We're going to right click down here, go to New and go to Solid. And we're going to create a black solid. So I'm going to click Make Comp Size and click OK. So this is going to be our main background. Now I'm going to right click again and create another solid. This time I'm going to make an all white solid. And you can just name it ink. You can name it fractal if you want, anything that kind of gets the point across. And we're going to make this composition a little bit bigger than our normal one. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to lock the aspect ratio and I'm just going to pull this up because I want this to be kind of twice the size of our normal comp so that whenever we do have the transition kind of growing across, you're not going to run into any issues with the edges. And then what you want to do is you want to go over to your masking tools. I'm going to alt click up here until I have my ellipse tool, and I'm going to just choose where I want this transition to start. So I'm going to just start in the bottom right corner and just make a little circle. Now what you do next is you're going to want to animate the mask. So I'm going to open up this mask path here, keyframe it. And I think this is going to be like a 3-second transition. So let's kind of just start gradually making this grow across the screen. So I'm going to hold down Control and make sure you're selecting the layer and not the mask. Hold down Control so we can start moving these anchor points. And as you see with the keyframes, here's what we got. So 1 second, it'll grow like that. So that should be fine for now. So we have a basic little shape here. So let's go back into our main comp. And I'm actually going to start fresh. Grab our galaxy environment. Let's grab our tunnel environment. I'm going to Control C to copy that. And let's go ahead and just make a new composition in our folder here, main comp, just so we don't run into any issues. So in our main comp, we're going to Control V to paste that. And we're going to place tunnel or whatever you want to transition from to at the top. So I'm going to go transition from my tunnel environment to my galaxy environment. So next up, what I want to do here, we can take our Luma Matte Transition comp and just place this into our main comp. We can even switch our blending mode to add, just so you can see the animation growth. So keep in mind what it's going to really look like as we go along. Once you're fine with the animation and the timing of everything, we're going to go to our effects and presets and search for roughen edges. And we're going to place that onto our little white solid here. Now let's go ahead and just grab our border and just crank that up. And if you guys want, you can put that all the way to the maximum value. So 500. I'm also going to put our complexity up to 10 so that we can start really getting this kind of ink blot fractal noise going on here. And if we press play, here's what that's looking like. You can also go to your mask options in the bottom left, and your mask opacity here is going to control the switch. So if you don't want this to abruptly just pop in, we can start this at 0 at our starting position, keyframe it, move a few seconds over, and just gradually bump that up. So let's maybe keep that at like 70% opacity here. And here's what that looks like. It kind of just grows in. This is what this is going to start to look like. As you can see, here's going to be the pattern of our growth. All right, so we're going to go ahead and just add some edges onto this transition. And if you don't know what I mean, this is what we're going to do here. So I'm going to right click on Luma Matte Transition. I'm going to pre-compose it again. And I'm going to name it Luma Matte Transition Main and click OK. Now we're going to double click into that pre-comp we just made. And I'm going to Control D to duplicate the Luma Matte Transition. So I just made a duplication on top. Now I'm going to click Track Matte down here, and I'm going to Luma Matte invert this bottom part. And if you turn off your toggle transparency grid, you'll see we've now isolated just the edges, the outside of this, which is going to really help for when we create our glow. Let's go back to our main comp here. Here's what that's starting to look like. Okay, at this point, we're gonna go and just start adding some effects onto our little animation that we've created here. So what you can do, you can add a glow effect onto here. And this is what really sells the effect. You can use the After Effects base glow, as you see here. If you really wanna get the most out of this transition, I recommend that you invest in some sort of external plugin to give you some more options for the glow. So here's using the base glow, which is pretty nice. I mean, once we apply the alpha transition and everything, it'll look okay. What I like is either if you have Red Giant Trapco, Star Glow is a really good plugin for this. If you have the Sapphire, if you have any Sapphire plugins, Glow Edges is one that I like a lot as well. As you see, it kind of adds a little bit more thickness onto here. I can lower the glow width a bit. I can lower my brightness a bit, and then I can change my color just like this. So in my opinion, Glow Edges is my favorite for this, but you don't need to have the external plugin. you could always just use the built-in After Effects glow. So here's with glow edges added in. Now the next thing you want to do is add a little bit of a blur onto this. So I'm just going to look up a fast box blur, and I'm gonna put the blur radius at 0.5, and you guys can also look up a little levels effect, and you can adjust the brightness of this. Now all you need to do is go to your tunnel environment layer, whatever layer you're trying to transition. You see your little track matte drop down, you can just set that to alpha matte. It's gonna show what's behind this layer in the shape of our little ink transition. So if I was to hide my galaxy, here's the transparency and how you could really see it affect our full tunnel. Now that's one way you could go about this, but that doesn't really look like it's happening in 3D space. So what I recommend that you do is you actually put this back on normal. You grab your Luma Matte transition main. I'm gonna Control C or Control X just to copy it. And I'm gonna pop into my actual tunnel environment composition that we made earlier. So here is where we used Element 3D to make the 3D tunnel. So we have our 3D tunnel, which we made earlier with Element 3D. We have our Luma Matte transition, which is this kind of wiping effect that we have going on here. And now what you can do the same exact thing we did earlier. We're just placing it in the main comp, so it's gonna react a little bit better. So under track matte, alpha matte, and now as you can see, it's really only wiping away just the shape of the tunnel. Make sure after the alpha matte that you just show this so you can see the full glow on the edges of everything. So as you guys can see, completely wipes away, and it's wiping away in the shape of the tunnel. Now there's an alternate way that you can do this. Because we use Element 3D, and before when I was showing you those custom layer maps and we were able to make it in the shape of the tunnel, using those custom maps from earlier, we can do the same thing for our little wipe transition, have it in the shape of the tunnel and give us some different shapes. So if you don't want it to wipe in this specific manner, what you could always do, you select your 3D tunnel that we made before, you go to your custom layers and make sure you're in the custom texture maps and not the text and masks. You need to be in the texture maps for this to work. Now you just select the name of whatever layer has that transition we made. So mine was transition pre-render, and we set it to source. And now you see we have a completely different animation going on here. So you have a few options for being able to create this. I think it's a cool effect, and I'm gonna go more in depth, give you guys some free resources so that it's easier to pull this off without having to do all the Luma inverting, the alpha inverting. I also wanna show how to do that in Adobe Premiere as well. So that's gonna be coming soon. All right guys, so here is what this transition looks like. And we talked about a lot so far, but let's start adding in some basic 3D elements like the car. I'll mention the 3D character. There's a lot of 3D floating buildings in the background. Again, you can just use Element for that. It really is as easy as just looking up 3D car model. You can use Turbo Squid if you'd like, Free 3D, CG Trader. The only thing you need to be careful with is sometimes, since they're using the names of the actual brands, you have to look into the licensing, but we're just using this as an example. You want to either have a Cinema 4D file or an OBJ. I'm just going to right click here and set this up. So I'm going to make a new solid. I'm going to name this car, and I'm going to apply the element effect onto here. So drag and drop that onto the solid. And now you just click scene setup. So if you were just to bring in an OBJ, here's what this would look like. Let's use auto normal. It's pretty small, so let's normalize the size. And there you go. So sometimes if you get a good model like this one, you're gonna have this all broken up. So you wouldn't even need to bring this into any external, because you can just use any preset shaders here, which are in Element, and just drag and drop it onto here. If you don't have any of these shaders, again, you can always just bring in the FBX into an external 3D software and then export out an OBJ or a C4D for Element. Even if you have zero 3D knowledge, doing that is pretty easy. So I'm just going to drop some of these little preset materials onto here. Once you're ready, just click OK. And another little nifty tool that you can use for Cinema 4D, as you see this is here, instead of having to use your world transform to kind of mess with this, you can go to Group 1 and you can go to Create Group Null. And use Group 1 only if your scene is in Group 1, obviously. Once you've done that, once you've opened that up, just click Create. And it's going to create this little null here. And you can use this null as a control for where you want the 3D model. It's a lot easier. So I can open up my null and I can orient, I can rotate, I can change Z position, all using the null. So we just have that floating in place, which obviously doesn't look that good. Another thing that you could do is you can just Control X all of this, pop into the tunnel animation and paste it in here. That way it's going to be reacting with our camera. So if you want it to kind of be reacting with the camera, if you want to animate different camera movements like in the weekend video, you can do that. Obviously you're going to have to compensate the speed for this. So if I go into my group null now, maybe we could just give it a little bit of speed. So we'll keyframe the position. And as we move forward, we'll just kind of send it forward a bit. Let's also scale this up because this looks pretty inaccurate with the road. And there you go. So we can have it driving along the road. And using your camera controls here, you could even click Control D on this camera to duplicate it. And we'll just rename this and I'll just call it Angle 2. This is a neat trick for making different camera angles, different animations out of one scene. We can hide camera 1 and in Angle 2, since we have these keyframes, let's just delete these keyframes for now. And you can kind of rotate around. It is possible to do something like that. Open back up camera 1. And another thing you can do, and I'm not going to get too in depth with it, but if you want, you can go back into the scene setup, or even in Cinema 4D or Blender, you could isolate the tires here. These are kind of just materials for it because it's all together, but you could isolate them and rotate them themselves so you can have those tires moving in your animation. But that's how we would be able to add something like the car. Now for the character, if you want to create your own custom character, I made a tutorial recently on my favorite software on how to do that. I think it's the easiest way, it's the fastest way. If you want a more basic, if you want a free and more basic version of that, you can use Adobe Fuse, which is actually included in your Adobe subscription. So I'll link below the tutorial I made on using Adobe Fuse, which is the free Adobe way. You guys probably already have it and don't even know. And I'll link the way using iClone, using Character Creator from Reallusion, an awesome way where you can go a lot more in depth and create characters of specific likeness. Same with buildings. If you want to use Element 3D, let's Control D on the car. If you guys have Element 3D's built-in Metropolitan pack, you guys will know that you have a bunch of little buildings here. So you don't need the Metropolitan pack. You could just go on Turbo Squid, same place I got the car from, and just look up free building, bring in that OBJ, that C4D file from Elements, and you're ready to go. Let's do the same thing here. Let's create a group null. You can easily just place this anywhere in your scene. Give it a little bit of keyframed orientation if you'd like. So pretty easy to add in those tiny little 3D touches like from the original music video that you see here, just using Element. To finalize this tutorial, I'm just going to show you how we can add some simple little fireworks in here. And this is something where if you just look up fireworks tutorial After Effects, there's a lot of info on there. But either way, let's go ahead and just make a new comp. We're going to go ahead and create a new black solid. We're going to look up that little CC particle systems too. So a similar way to how we made those circles in the galaxy earlier. You can just drop this on and you'll see it kind of already almost looks like a firework. For gravity, let's just set this from 1 to 0.2 and then let's put the resistance at 10. And then already you can see you've basically made a firework. See that we keyframed our birth rate at this position. Just go ahead and set this back to 0. If you want, you can open this up here and you can adjust the keyframe. So maybe you don't want it that long. Something as simple as that. And we could do the same thing. We'll just enable this as a 3D layer. We've already got our camera. So you can see it kind of passes by. It isn't as polished. We're using After Effects only, but I wanted to give you guys as many of the easy techniques used as possible. Creating those different environments, I think that's where After Effects really shines in this sense. And then you can use things like Element 3D if you want some simple 3D, but if you want a full polished look, I do recommend using a 3D software and coupling it with After Effects. If you did enjoy, if you did learn something, please leave a like on the video to help the growth of the channel. As always, guys, thank you so much for the support. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you guys in the next one.